Just imagine this. You've finally made it. After years of chasing your dream, city after city, couch after couch, job after job, this is it. You step off the elevator into the penthouse of a high-rise in the very heart of the city. The doors slide open with a hiss. Marble meets glass. Silence meets possibility. You take one slow step forward, your footsteps echoing softly off the high ceilings. This place feels like it exists above the world. Glass floors stretch beneath your feet like frozen water, shimmering under the soft interior lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretch along the walls like movie screens, and beyond them, nothing but the slow hum of midnight. City lights blink like distant stars. The world is alive out there, but up here? It's just you, breathless in a place too beautiful to belong to you. You put your bags down. Exhale. The scent of expensive cologne still lingers in the air, something warm, musky, expensive. Not your scent. Not yet. You turn a slow circle. Black leather sofas. A wall of vinyl records in gold frames. Abstract art that probably costs more than your old apartment. And right there, across the room, a glossy black piano under a spotlight like it's waiting for someone to sit and confess something honest. You mutter to yourself, "Is this really my life now?" And then, the front door creaks open. You freeze. Heavy footsteps echo down the hallway like a slow beat building up in a song. You turn toward the sound. There he is. Sean Combs. Diddy. Puff Daddy. P. Diddy. Now. Love. He's wearing a black silk shirt, unbuttoned just enough to show a gold chain resting against his chest. His shades stay on, even though the sun set hours ago. He doesn't smile. Not yet. He just stands there, backlit by hallway light, like some mythical figure walking out of a memory you didn't know you had. He scans you once, head to toe. His jaw tight. His presence fills the room like bass at a block party. Confident. Quiet. Commanding. "You know the meaning of life?" he asks. You blink, trying to find your voice. What? He takes a slow step forward, the gold on his wrist catching the light. Then another. "The meaning of life," he repeats. "It ain't comfort. It ain't fame. It's hustle. It's waking up every day like the world owes you nothing, and you still go out and take it all anyway." He stops just in front of you. Eye level. Voice low. "You in?" There's no pause. No smile. No jokes. Just that question hanging between you, as electric as the city outside. You feel your throat tighten. You nod. Yeah, you whisper. "I'm in." He doesn't nod back. He just turns away, sauntering into the room like he's always belonged here, because he has. He moves past the piano, fingers brushing the keys. A chord hums in the air. A memory of a song. Then he disappears into the hallway, and you're left standing in the glow of your new world. You don't know what comes next. You don't know the rules of this place yet. But one thing is suddenly, completely clear. You're living with a legend. Not just a celebrity. Not just a businessman or an artist. But someone who rewrote the rules, then threw the pen out the window and dared the world to follow. You're in his world now. A world where music isn't background noise, it's the air. Where clothing isn't just fashion, it's armor. Where every conversation might be a lesson, a challenge, a dare. Where every night might end with jazz or champagne or a sudden storm of memory. This isn't just a penthouse. It's a stage. A legacy. A temple to the hustle. And you? You're not just a guest. You've been chosen. Whether you're ready or not. Welcome home. Your first night in the penthouse didn't feel real. The floor beneath your feet still felt too clean, too smooth. The air too still. The scent of luxury, of polished wood, rare incense, and whatever fragrance Diddy wore, still clung to every surface. It was well past midnight, but you couldn't sleep. Jet lag clung to your body like a second skin, your mind still stuck somewhere between time zones and disbelief. So you wandered. Barefoot, in a hoodie too thin for the chill of the air-conditioned hallways, you walked toward the soft light coming from the living room. The city outside the glass walls glittered like a dream you hadn't dared to fully imagine. Skyscrapers blinked in rhythm, and a faint hum of the world below kept whispering, "You made it. You're here." Then you heard it, warm, crackling, analog. Vinyl. You stepped into the room and saw him, seated in the corner near a record player the size of a small table. His back was to you, but you could see the silhouette, perfectly still, one arm draped casually over the side of the chair, the other holding a glass of something dark and expensive. He didn't turn to look at you when he spoke. "No way out," he said. You followed his gaze toward the spinning record. The needle floated gently on black grooves. The music, melancholy, layered, confident, poured into the space like a ghost from the 90s. "My debut album," he continued, "dropped in 97. Straight to the top of Billboard. You know what that meant back then?" You nodded, too intimidated to speak yet. Of course you knew. No Way Out wasn't just an album, it was a movement. A sonic monument to ambition, grief, power, and reinvention. It defined a sound. It buried a friend. It launched an era. He finally turned to look at you, raising an eyebrow. "I'll be missing you, you know that one, right?" You nodded again. "Yeah. Biggie." He swirled the drink in his glass. "That track ain't even on this pressing." But it held #1 for 11 weeks straight. It wasn't a song. It was a funeral procession. A love letter. A vow. You walked over, slowly, and sat on the edge of the velvet couch. The record hissed as it spun. The lights were low, warm, like the golden glow of a street lamp after rain. He leaned back, watching the turntable. People thought I made that label to get rich, to be famous. He turned to you, expression unreadable. But bad boy? I built that from zero. From nothing. Back in '93, I was just a kid with ambition. No budget. No map. No promise. He took a sip, then set the glass down on a small lacquered table beside him. I signed talent when no one else was paying attention. I took chances when the room told me not to. I made hits, not because I had a machine behind me, but because I was the machine. Biggie, Faith, Maze, they weren't just artists. They were family. You could hear the weight in his voice. He wasn't bragging. He was remembering. He walked toward the window and looked out across the skyline. You stayed seated, listening. Bad boy wasn't a label, he said. It was a revolution. A mirror for the streets. We gave voice to hunger, to heartbreak, to grind. And when they told us to sit down, we danced louder. The music shifted, victory began to play, that unmistakable beat wrapped in tension and triumph. You watched him from behind. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. Still, something about him felt restless. Not haunted, but unfinished. He turned around again, softer this time. You think I wanted the fame? He asked. Hell no. Fame is noise. What I wanted was impact. Legacy. He gestured to the wall, where plaques lined up like medals from war. Gold. Platinum. Diamond. Awards from countries you'd never been to. But the music? He pointed toward the turntable. That's where the truth lives. You sat there, heart pounding with a kind of quiet reverence. You weren't just sharing a room with Sean Combs. You were breathing in a chapter of hip-hop history. Every word he spoke carried decades of sweat, fire, betrayal, and brilliance. Then, finally, he cracked a smile. A small one, but real. I didn't start a label to get famous, he said again, shaking his head. I started it to make history. And as the beat throbbed through the speakers and the city lights blinked like applause far beyond the windows, you realized something. You weren't just crashing on a legend's couch. You were being welcomed into the pages of something timeless. By midday, the golden morning haze had faded into bright sunlight cutting through the penthouse windows. You'd finally managed to shake off the fog of jet lag. A fresh shirt, a splash of cold water to the face, and a tour around the place made you realize this was more than a home. It was a living museum. A monument to ambition. You wandered into the laundry room, not expecting much. Maybe a basket or two, maybe some designer detergent. What you found was a pile, no, a mountain of clothes. Racks of jackets. Shelves of sneakers. Folded button-downs and slacks arranged like they were waiting for a stylist's approval. And everything, every single tag, read the same. Sean John. You picked up a black t-shirt. The fabric was thick, soft, well-stitched. Not something mass-produced. It felt like something made with care. Purpose. Legacy. Crazy, right? A voice behind you said. You turned around. Diddy was standing there, barefoot, holding a mug of coffee in one hand and a crisp white tank in the other. He looked casual, like this was just another Tuesday. But you were still catching your breath from the idea that even his laundry room felt like a fashion archive. You see this? He said, lifting a heather gray tee and giving it a half fold. Sean John, you replied. Everywhere. He nodded, then smirked as he rolled the shirt perfectly, almost like muscle memory. CFDA Menswear Designer of the Year. 2004, he said with a chuckle. That's like winning an Oscar, but for style. You raised your eyebrows. Wait, you won that? He gave you a look, half amused, half proud. Damn right I did. First hip-hop mogul to ever get that honor. You know what that meant to the industry? To us? It told the world that we didn't just know how to wear fashion. We could create it. You grabbed another item and helped him fold, carefully, trying not to screw it up. A jacket with bold stitching and clean lines. Minimalist, but undeniably street. It looked like something you'd see in a high-end magazine, next to a $3,000 price tag. So, you started. You're not just music. You're also a businessman? He laughed, a short, dry chuckle as he set down his coffee. Businessman? He echoed, like the word was too small. Let me break it down. He stepped back, crossing his arms over his chest. Ciroc wasn't my vodka, but I made it hot. Partnered with M, flipped the whole game. Turned a bottom shelf brand into a luxury drink. Sales skyrocketed. That wasn't luck. That was vision. He started walking toward the hallway, motioning for you to follow. You did, still holding a pair of designer jeans. You ever watch Revolt TV? He asked. Yeah, you said. Here and there. He turned his head and raised a brow. I built that. A whole damn network. Black-owned. Culture-led. Music, politics, voices that matter. You don't wait for a seat at the table, you build your own. You passed a framed blueprint on the wall, an early layout of the Revolt studio headquarters. And Justin's, he added. That was my restaurant back in the day. Soul food meets soul spirit. Atlanta, New York, packed every night. Celebs, artists, suits, regular folks. We broke bread and made history. You followed him into another room, this one filled with awards, photos, memorabilia. But this wasn't a shrine. It was a command center. Whiteboards lined the walls with notes scribbled in red marker. New ventures. Launch dates. Possible brand partnerships. He looked over his shoulder. And I ain't even started talking about my real estate moves, or the tech investments, or the production deals. You couldn't help it. You were overwhelmed. You came here thinking you were going to learn more about the music, the hits, the era-defining anthems. But this was a different kind of power. Why do all of it? You asked quietly. He paused, then looked you dead in the eye. Because they said we couldn't. Said we could rap, dance, maybe throw a party, but never build. Never own. He gestured around the room at the empire still growing, evolving, breathing. So I built. You stood in silence. It hit you then. Living with Diddy wasn't just about proximity to fame. It was proximity to vision. You were standing inside a blueprint drawn by a man who refused to be boxed in. A mogul who had clawed out space in industries that had long locked their doors. This wasn't just a man who made hits. This was a man who made moves. And as you walked back to finish folding that laundry, you realized this wasn't just a pile of clothes. It was legacy. It was proof. It was the fabric of an empire. Night fell slowly over the penthouse. The skyline outside turned from gold to indigo, then into a dark blanket pierced with flickers of light, cars streaming across bridges, neon signage blinking far below, the pulse of the city never slowing. But inside, the atmosphere had shifted. You were on the couch, staring at the television, barely breathing. The volume was low, but the words on screen spoke louder than any sound could. Headlines scrolled in red. Footage played in loops. Anchors repeated key phrases again and again. Guilty on 2 counts. Awaiting federal sentencing. Fall from grace. Sean Combs, also known as Diddy. You glanced toward the hallway, unsure if he was watching too. Unsure if he even cared anymore. Then you heard him. Slow, deliberate footsteps. The kind that used to announce power. Now, they just whispered, "Wait." He entered the room calmly, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood down, sweatpants, no jewelry, nothing performative. Just Sean. Not Diddy. Not Puff. Not love. Just a man facing consequences. He sat beside you, exhaled long and deep, then looked at the screen. It showed the front of MDC Brooklyn, where federal authorities confirmed he was currently being held, physically or legally, it didn't matter. In the public eye, he was no longer untouchable. "You know I'm still in holding, right?" He said quietly, eyes fixed on the scrolling Chiron. "Convicted on 2 counts. You didn't say anything. You just listened." He shifted his body slightly, turning toward you, not for attention, but for honesty. "They got me on transportation for prostitution. That's what stuck. The sex trafficking? Acquitted. Racketeering? Acquitted too. But it don't matter to the world. Headlines only need one word, guilty." His voice didn't tremble, but you could hear something beneath it, fatigue. Maybe regret. maybe anger. Maybe just the pressure of 1,000 days collapsing into one moment. I'm sitting in MDC Brooklyn, he went on. Concrete box. Waiting to hear how many years they want to give me in October. He paused. The TV moved on to another story, but you could still see his name in the ticker, bouncing along the bottom like it didn't belong to a real person. He continued. Sirach cut ties last week. Quietly. Just slipped out the back door like a one-night stand. Can't blame them. They built with me, but they ain't about to go down with me. You nodded slowly. He rubbed his palms together, staring down at them like they held some answer he hadn't figured out yet. And that's not all. Civil suits. Piling up. People I ain't heard from in 10 years suddenly got claims, memories, lawyers. He let out a short, bitter laugh. They smell blood. And they're not wrong. You turned toward him fully now. His face, once the image of swagger and self-assurance, looked older tonight. Not aged, but weathered. Like he'd walked through a storm that never ended. And for the first time since you moved in, you didn't see a mogul. You didn't see the music, the fashion, the empire. You saw the man who used to wake up before sunrise to outwork everyone. The kid from Mount Vernon who danced his way into Uptown Records. The grieving friend who dropped "I'll be missing you" like a prayer after losing Biggie. The survivor. The builder. The believer. And now, the fallen king. You moved closer. Without speaking, you wrapped your arms around him. He didn't resist. He just let it happen, resting his elbows on his knees, head low, your hand on his back. Do you think it's over? You whispered. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something you wouldn't forget. No, he murmured. But it'll never be the same. The room was silent after that. The only sound was the city, far away, still moving. The world outside didn't pause, not for headlines, not for justice, not for broken men trying to hold themselves together. And as you sat there beside him, you realized something powerful. The world loved to build icons. It loved to lift them high, put them on pedestals, worship their shine. But it loved even more to watch them fall. And yet, beneath the court cases, beyond the judgments, past the empire collapsing around him, there was still him. A man. Flawed. Bruised. But still human. And in that moment, that's all you could offer him: silence, presence, and the fragile hope that somewhere beyond this darkness, a new chapter might still be written. It was 2:07 a.m. when you heard the knock. Soft. Measured. Almost unsure. You were half awake, lying in bed, scrolling aimlessly on your phone, the glow of the screen painting your face in cold blue light. The city outside was quiet, or as quiet as it ever got. Distant sirens, the occasional honk. But up here, in this sky-high penthouse, it felt like you were suspended in another world. You sat up, unsure at first if the knock was real. Then it came again. gentler this time. You opened the door to find him, Sean, standing there in silence. He wasn't wearing a hoodie or designer jacket. Just a plain white tee and sweats. No chains. No fragrance. No presents to perform. "Can't sleep," he muttered. You stepped aside. He walked into your room without a word, his eyes darting around like he wasn't sure if he should have come. Then he sat down on the chair by the window, the one you always used to read or stare into the night. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The moonlight cast long shadows across his face. He didn't look at you when he spoke. "You know why I changed it to love?" he asked softly. "Why I dropped the Diddy, the puff, the everything else?" You sat at the edge of your bed, unsure if he wanted an answer. He shook his head, answering himself. "Because I needed to give meaning back." He paused. "All my life I built, hustled, pushed, created, controlled. Everything had to move like I said. Every room, every deal, every person. I wore ambition like a second skin. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why." The silence settled deep between you. "I thought if I renamed myself Love, maybe I'd remember. Not just who I was, but who I wanted to be. For my kids. For myself." He leaned back and looked out the window now. You could see the reflection of the skyline in his eyes. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "even empire builders feel lost in their own towers." He let the words hang, like a line from a song he hadn't recorded yet. A poem no one would read but you. You didn't say anything. What could you say to a man who had been everything, producer, icon, mogul, myth, and now sat in your room like a child asking the dark for clarity? He pulled his knees closer, almost curling into himself. "There's this thing nobody tells you about legacy," he whispered. "It owns you. You build it thinking it's yours. But then it grows teeth. Expectations. Pressure. People who need you to stay strong even when you're falling apart." He turned to you finally. Not as Diddy. Not as Love. Just Sean. "I forgot how to cry a long time ago," he admitted. "Had to. Industry don't respect tears. But lately, man," he trailed off. You walked over and sat on the floor beside his chair, looking up at him like he was some broken monument from another century. Weathered. Still beautiful. Still standing. But cracked. "I hear them whispering," he said. "In the headlines. In the lawsuits. In the silence. They think I'm done. Finished. That all I ever was a product of power and parties." He turned toward you again. "But you see something else. Don't you?" You nodded. You didn't need to explain. You saw it from the beginning, the pain in the pauses between his brags, the wounds he never wrapped, the man buried beneath the mogul. He reached for his phone, opened a note. Read from it, like it was scripture. They crowned me king, then waited for me to bleed. But I still got ink in my pen, and I ain't done writing. He looked up. I wrote that yesterday, before the indictment hearing. You smiled softly. You should record it. Maybe, he said. Maybe I will. He stood up, walked over to your bookshelf, ran his fingers along the spines. I'm not scared of falling, he said. I'm scared of forgetting why I stood in the first place. You didn't respond. You just let the moment be. Because that night wasn't about answers. It wasn't about legal updates or business plans or chart positions. It was about truth. Raw. Quiet. Frightening. It was the moment you stopped living with him and started understanding him. Not the mogul. Not the empire. But the man. And for once, he wasn't performing. He wasn't persuading. He wasn't building anything. He was just being. And in that stillness, in that 2 a.m. breath between shame and clarity, you heard the faintest sound. A whisper. A poem. A soul trying to find its way home. The night before you were supposed to leave, the penthouse was quiet in a way it hadn't been in weeks. No music. No late-night conversations. No distant hum of a vinyl spinning in the next room. Just the soft, steady rhythm of the city breathing through the glass walls, and the low buzz of your packed suitcase waiting by the door. You had spent the day slowly saying goodbye to each corner of this surreal space. The couch where you listened to No Way Out. The laundry room that had become a museum of Sean John. The hallway where whispers turned into confessions. And the floor-to-ceiling windows where he'd once stood, not as a mogul, but as a man, weathered, honest, stripped of performance. You'd come here expecting to witness greatness. You never expected to carry it home with you. As you passed through the kitchen one last time, you saw it. A single envelope. Resting on the marble counter, with your name written in thick black marker. His handwriting, bold and slanted, impatient but deliberate. You hesitated, then picked it up, broke the seal, and unfolded the letter. His voice met you in the words, "This house, I'm giving it to you." You paused, heart pounding. Not just from the gesture, but from the gravity. This wasn't a gift. It was a transfer. A symbol. A burden. An offering. You kept reading. I've built towers. I've built brands. I've built illusions too. But you? You saw through them. You saw me. And that's why I'm leaving this space in your hands. You sat down, slowly, the letter trembling in your fingers. The ink slightly smudged. Like maybe he had written it late at night, and maybe, just maybe, his hands had shaken too. You understand the music, the fashion, the law. But more importantly, You understand the flawed human being behind it all. And that's rare. That's powerful. Your eyes burned, but you kept going. This ain't just about a penthouse. It's about continuation. It's about someone who knows when to build and when to pause. Maybe now's my pause. Maybe now it's your verse. You folded the letter gently, like it might break if you moved too quickly. You placed it on your lap and stared out the window. The city was still alive, oblivious to the quiet transfer of legacy happening inside this glass tower. You stood and walked into the living room. The turntable sat still, the needle lifted. But you could hear the ghost of victory anyway. You sat on the same couch where he once said, "I didn't start a label to get famous. I started it to make history." And you realized he wasn't just handing you a property. He was handing you a part of his unfinished story. The part where greatness meets gravity, where hustle meets healing, where power finally bows to truth. And then, like a gentle echo, his words from weeks ago returned to you. Hustle matters. But being honest with yourself? That matters more. You closed your eyes, holding on to those words like scripture. Not because they came from a man with platinum records and billion-dollar deals, but because they came from someone who had everything and still found himself sitting alone at 2 a.m., wondering what any of it truly meant. You walked to your suitcase, zipped it shut. Not with finality, but with purpose. You weren't leaving the penthouse anymore. You were becoming part of it. Becoming part of him. And part of everything he hoped would live beyond the headlines. You turned off the lights. Let the city illuminate the space one last time. The skyline stretched in front of you like possibility. And in that soft, silver moment, you whispered, not to the room, not even to yourself, but to the man who made you believe that legacy wasn't just about empire. It was about evolution. Thank you, Sean Diddy Combs, for the music that shaped a generation, for the blood that stitched itself into fashion lines, for the poetry you whispered in the middle of legal storms, for the truth in your silence, for the weight in your questions, for showing the world that even legends bleed, and for the final reminder that behind every empire, there is a man still learning to be himself.